Okay, so how do we get the sharing going here on the presentation? Push that, and then I can run it from here. Okay. Oops. All right, how's that? Oh, it's not going backwards. Okay. How are we ready to go? Yes? Okay. Hi, everyone. My name's Rob Abel. I'm the CEO of the 1EdTech Consortium, formerly known as the IMS Global Learning Consortium. It's my pleasure to be here with you today. I am actually here in Tokyo, although I know I am virtual for most of you, but I am actually here live in person. And I'm very excited to be here. 2022, this year, is a big year for us at IMS Global Learning Consortium because we've launched a new brand, which, as you can see, is called 1EdTech. And we use this tagline, Power Learner Potential. I'm giving to you a presentation today on what the new brand is all about and a little bit on how did we get here. I believe it is very appropriate for this presentation to follow the previous presentation, which provided many details on some of the detailed work of the 1EdTech Consortium, because I am not going to be covering the details of the technical work of 1EdTech Consortium. I know there are other sessions for that. But I just wanted to start out by saying thank you to my hosts of the IMS Japan Society for inviting me, and really for the wonderful job that in the evolution over the last 5 or 6 years in the growth of the IMS Japan Society. It's been a real honor to be involved with everyone here in Japan, and I'm very proud of the work that you're doing here. Okay, so the 1EdTech, Power Learner Potential, what is it all about? Well, some people think that a new brand is about a logo and maybe a name. And it is true that our logo has evolved some, and it is true that we have a new name at this moment, 1EdTech. But a new brand is about a lot more than that. A brand is about the experience that the customer, if you want to call it that, in our case, our members and the general at-large stakeholders in educational technology have with our organization. And the idea behind the 1EdTech brand really came out of a board meeting of the IMS Board of Directors in the summer of 2018. And it started in earnest in 2019. So for several years, really 3 years, we've been working on the brand launch. We thought we might launch the new brand in 2020, but of course, as you're all aware, COVID came in 2020. And so therefore, people were, you could say, were distracted or not able to pay attention on something like a new brand, we felt. And so we've delayed it till this year, till 2022. So let me get right into it. To start out, I just wanted to first point out that 1EdTech, the brand, is not a total remake of who we are, what we're doing. In fact, it's really just a kind of logical, normal evolution of the reflection of really the work we have already been doing in the organization, really for many years, and how it's evolved. And so, in one sense, the 1EdTech brand is not a big change in any respect in terms of what the community is doing. But we do hope and feel that the 1EdTech brand a more meaningful name with a more meaningful call to action will be inspiring for our collaboration to help accelerate the many positive impacts that we've been having on digital technology as it relates to learning and education. So let me explain some of this to you. First of all, the thing to understand about one is it's about unity. It's about a united commitment, we like to say, because our community is committed to this idea of an open and inclusive educational technology ecosystem. I've already heard the term ecosystem used many times here today, and ecosystem is a very important word, and I'm going to explain why. Now, the idea of 1EdTech is to be a very inclusive brand. It's to support not just our members, but really all stakeholders in the educational technology universe, which includes learners themselves, every educational institution at all levels, and every edtech supplier. The connected ecosystem, which is what we're building together, is not owned by anyone. It's not owned. It's a public good, in essence. And I'm going to explain why, but that's because it's based on open standards. But together, we are building this ecosystem, not just for the sake of selling products or even for having standards, but really for powering the abilities of every learner. And that's where we're going. So let me explain. I'm going to give you just a little bit of history, because if you don't have the history of the organization, it might be very difficult to understand how we got here. I think some of this was covered in some of the earlier presentations, but this organization has a long and really storied history. I'm very privileged to be the CEO. I have for the last 16 years. But it began under an organization called EDUCAUSE, which is a US-based organization that is also known around the world as one of the leading information technology organizations, if not the leading organization in higher ed. It was a project to build an IMS. IMS, the acronym then, stood for Instructional Management System. Today, most of us would call it a learning management system or an LMS or learning environment or something along those lines. But that gives you an idea of how early the forefathers were of IMS, the work. And they were largely universities, a group of universities that got together because they wanted to collaborate on shaping the future of this software, and also collaborate with each other even, and potentially building the software. What happened was, as though the attention turned to open standards, because as more and more suppliers got brought in, there was a recruitment effort of suppliers. I was one of them at the time. I was responsible for e-learning products worldwide at Oracle at that time. I was one of the early sponsors, but as more and more suppliers came in, the call from the suppliers was, well, we don't really need you universities to build an IMS. We need you to pull together really what today we would call an ecosystem, but a set of open standards so that many, many different suppliers and many, many institutions could work together. And so IMS, by the time it had spun out of EDUCAUSE in 1999, was fully focused on developing standards. And in 2006, when I came on board into IMS, we had this problem, which was, of course, the term IMS didn't mean anything anymore. No one was using the term IMS. Instructional Management System was not even a category anymore. And so we initially started putting some words underneath the logo, talk about innovation, adoption, and learning, because that's what we felt our community was about. Now, in 2013, we did upgrade our logo, and we did upgrade our tagline a bit. We said better learning from better learning technology. So we've had some evolution all along here. But the thing to understand is that since 2006, we have been talking about a mission that is much larger than standards. Standards are very important as the foundation for distributed innovation. However, without large-scale adoption of standards and a strong community behind that adoption, it is very difficult to get impact out of standards, as most of you know. If you're the one organization in the room implementing a standard, that doesn't help you very much. You need collaboration. You need a community. So, and you need that scale to basically figure out, are the standards good standards or not? Will the standards actually work well? And we also realized that we had to start to recognize the impact of the scalable adoption of educational innovation that was enabled by the standards. So this feedback loop between these different areas were very important. But the important thing to understand here is even in 2006, we made the commitment as an organization to do much more than just develop and publish standards. The adoption became critically important, as well as our ability to recognize impact. I heard in the last session the mention of the next generation digital learning environment work at EDUCAUSE. What's happened particularly over the last 16 years is we've become, IMS Global has become a very, very influential factor in many of the critical discussions around the evolution of educational and learning technology, so much so that we've been featured as a major partner of all sorts of major organizations, including EDUCAUSE itself now, even though we're separated from EDUCAUSE, and even being followed by analysts in the IT industry. The other thing to understand about the community, especially if you're new to it, is that we have a very long history of innovations that have been enabled by our standards that really have changed educational technology from where it has been. There have been fundamental building blocks that have changed EdTech, we like to say forever, because once these standards were created and out and widely adopted, in this case, 2010, the very first one, Learning Platforms as a Resource Hub, that's the initial success of LTI, Learning Tools Interoperability. Now you'll notice that there's no standards mentioned on any of these bubbles, which I'm not going to go through all of them because it's a very long list and it would take me at least 5 minutes to talk about each one. That's on purpose because sometimes when we start talking with our acronym soup about standards and what they do, it's very useful for technical people, but for the others who are observing us and who are asking to get behind what we're doing, they don't really comprehend or understand the key benefit. And LTI, really what it did was it changed the role of LMSs to really become true integration hubs. Before LTI, it was cost prohibitive to integrate into learning management systems. Every single learning management system had a different way to do an integration. It had its own set of custom APIs. It had its own set of developer networks. Blackboard had something called building blocks, for instance. And the reality was these were detriments to scale. This did not actually help the industry scale. And so what happened is LTI made sense to everyone, the end users, because they benefited from flexibility and choice of tools, but also to the suppliers because this helped them scale their business as well. And you could look at every single one of these other ones here, which I'm not going to go through, but you will have this presentation to look at, as really kind of being in the same position, a highly leveraged technology. I will say, just parenthetically, that if you go forward to 2019 and the bubble there, that's the new version of LTI we call LTI Advantage. What's the major benefit there? Well, much deeper integration. Much deeper integration between learning tools and resources and learning management system platforms. And we've experienced a lot of growth. In fact, over the last 16 years, we've grown from 50 members to about 750 today. So that's quite a lot of growth. We also have regional organizations and affiliations like the 1EdTech or the IMS Global Japan Society. And I'm only showing 31 members there because that's the number of members that are part of the global organization. I realize that the participation in the local community is larger than that, and that's very good. That's we set it up that way. And we give most of our regional affiliates the opportunity to really run things in the way that makes sense for what they're trying to achieve in their region. But I will note, if you look at the success of IMS Japan Society today, which I believe in the chart we showed earlier is something along the lines of 60 plus organizations. We look at where we are in Europe now with 81 organizations. I just wanted to point out that both of those regions are now larger in terms of membership than IMS was when I came into IMS in 2005. Because in 2005, we had 50 members. And now we're up to 750. Now, why? Why are we growing like this? Well, because this idea for both open standards for educational technology and the idea of the ecosystem, the open ecosystem is an idea whose time has come. But also look at the balance in the memberships, the balance between suppliers and what you might call end user organizations, meaning associations, government organizations, and actual institutions. This is the secret of success in terms of an organization like ours. And so we actually hired a very well-known marketing agency in early 2019 to help us put together the new brand positioning. They're called the Stein Agency, Stein IAB. And they're a global organization. They're not just a US organization. They did over 100 interviews with members and others, looked at our competitors, so to speak, and others in the landscape. And they found these 4 things were things that our community, our collaboration, were particularly and uniquely good at. Cross-boundary leadership. So what does that mean? That means technical folks, academic folks, so educational leadership, technical leadership. It also means around the globe, right? It also means boundaries, jumping across boundaries around the globe and catalyzing cooperation around the globe. It also means between K-12, higher ed, and now even corporate learning. This is something that we do incredibly well in the organization. And when I say organization, I mean the community itself. We also, of course, are very good at the foundations for a connected ecosystem. That's what you can think of as the standards work. We also find that our members, whether they be institutional or whether they be suppliers, have been able to accelerate their own leadership in digital learning. When they participate in our community, they move much faster in terms of accelerating their leadership than if they were out on their own. And finally, but most importantly, we found that our work has been very focused on the goal of enriching teaching and learning experiences. What this means is that if you look across the 750 members, they're all paying dues to us, but the dues are a very small part of the investment. The main investment is what's going on, say, in organizations like IMS Japan Society, but in each and every member organization, it really amounts to hundreds of $millions a year that are being invested in our work. And that's one of the reasons why we're continuing to grow and gain traction. So we call those, what I just showed, the brand pillars, still very technical in nature. When it comes down to, though, what we were looking for is a brand that's inspiring, that can inspire us as a community, inspire us to move forward. So we use this term inspired a lot. And here's the definition of inspired. But it's really what gives you the spirit to act, energizes, motivates you. And so now I want to talk a bit about that. And it was really interesting because the branding company, the marketing company that we work with, really came down unanimously to it's all about the learner. It's all about the learner, right? And it's about the learner throughout their entire lives. So that's where we came up with what's called the brand promise, which is the little tagline we're using, power learner potential. I like to say it as this: together we power learner potential, because that gets across the point that it's the collaboration that's powering the learner potential. Every supplier, every institution that's working in this collaboration is powering learner potential for millions and millions of learners. So many people understand the term elevator speech. This would be the short way to talk about the new brand. And it really kind of comes down to this set of kind of, it's a long sentence. It's a set of like phrases. It's about a united commitment to work together to achieve an open, trusted, and innovative educational technology ecosystem that serves the needs of every learner. So those words, open, trusted, and innovative, they mean very specific things to us. They could sound like very, very general terms, but this is how we look at those terms, right? Open has to be choice enabling choice for teachers, learners, faculty, etc., right? It has to be using open standards to improve the options for learners and improve the options to bring products together to work for the cause of learners and teachers. Trusted, safe, transparent, particularly verifiable. If you've got an ecosystem, you want to trust but verify. If you can trust and verify, what do? You build long-lasting partnerships. That is the foundation, the bedrock for partnerships. And we find within our community, the suppliers and the institutional members, the buyers, they are very, very close-knit. There's a lot of, I like to say, there's a lot of love in our community because people understand what they're doing, that they're working for the greater good as well as themselves, and they're committed to each other. And finally, innovative to us means catalyzing advancements in education and digital learning. And we're very proud, and I could take a whole nother session to go through that set of bubbles I showed a couple of charts ago. We were the first organization to make things like this happen in the way that we did. And we've catalyzed those advancements right from the beginning in the formation of the IMS, which eventually became the LMS, to many, many other categories in EdTech. Now, some people say, well, where do open standards fit into this play of talking about the learner and talking about the higher level purpose? Well, they're the ecosystem platform. I use the term platform in quotes and parentheses because we're not a software platform. The supplier members build their own software and their own platforms, but it's a platform that sets the rules for how the ecosystem partners work together. Their products literally work together through open standards. So it's just like a biological ecosystem that has certain rules for the way certain chemicals are exchanged and what have you, and DNA and so forth. Well, the DNA behind our collaboration are open standards. And they don't actually have to be all open standards from our organization, by the way. We're very much in favor of open standards from other organizations as well. And our community, as you can see, if you talk to our community members, they know that we're constantly talking about other standards as well. What's on the left here are the work streams. I'm going to get to those a little bit later. Again, the work streams of what we're actually doing. And it's from those work streams, our members working together, that the standards, of course, are created. The verification part, well, it was talked about earlier. We're very proud of our certification program because it is by far the best program that's ever been developed by any standards organization we're aware of, quite frankly, in any sector, in terms of the sophistication and quality and meaningfulness of achieving the standard, the certification. It's not just a marketing piece. It can be used for marketing, but it's really used to mean that the integration's gotten to a certain level. Today, we actually have even more capability. We have something called compatibility check, which can test live integrations that can go even further. I'm not going to talk much about that today, but we're constantly taking this idea of verification to the next level because we want to get to plug and play. We want to get all the feedback from the marketplace, and we want to continue to improve the standards so they really can remove cost from the equation as well as enable new capabilities. For many years, we've been talking about this idea of ecosystem. This is a chart that I've been showing for a long, long time that really talks about kind of a maturity model, right? And on the left-hand side are the y-axis are really the impact of standards, right? They enable you to do more with digital, starting with the better usability, all the way up to getting more insights from data. But it's actually that x-axis that is at least, if not more important, because the x-axis requires a strategy for educational transformation. How are you going to improve education? This is something I was saying to EDUCAUSE the whole time we were deeply involved in the next generation digital learning environment. I was asking the question, well, is this about next generation environment, or is this about next generation learning? And in our case, we are definitely about next generation learning, which you can only get from ecosystem products that work together in ways that are not accomplished yet today by single products or single vertical stacks from a product. So this maturity idea is very important. We've been talking about it for a long time. And I wanted to point that out because now you know that the idea of the 1EdTech focus on ecosystem is not a new thing. In fact, it's been evolving with us for quite a long time. This is from our webpage, our website, 1edtech.org. It's a new website. We're still transitioning some pieces of the website. And by the way, the IMS Global Learning Consortium name will live on for a very long time because we literally have hundreds of thousands of pages of specification documents that are labeled IMS Global Learning Consortium, and we're maintaining that trademark, and over time, we're going to evolve. But we're very proud of IMS Global Learning Consortium and the work we've done. And 1EdTech will take over time as it is our website. At the top level, you can see these things we call educational leadership imperatives. You might call them strategies. This is a very important part of the new brand because this is a greater emphasis on what we as an organization hope to achieve and impact over the next 10, even 20 years in terms of improving education, improving educational experiences. And we're coming right out and saying that here and starting out with this. And we developed these through very close collaboration with our board of directors, and in particular in their organizations, which represented K-12, higher ed, suppliers, institutions. I said that we had delayed the launch because of the COVID, and that actually gave us some interesting time, additional time, which actually helped us, gave us the time to develop these imperatives. So these imperatives are part of the passion. They're part of the passion of where we want to go with the organization. And they came directly from hearing from our members who told us stories that fit into these categories, And those stories are actually on our website now. There's 12 of them. There's 3 for each of these 4 imperatives. If you click on the link, you can see them. I'm going to tell you a little bit about each one here without going into too much depth, because again, I could talk for a very, very long time about any of all of these because I'm so close to this work with our community. All right, so the first imperative, I like to call it enabling teaching and learning that rises above. Transformative learning is great, but it sounds a little, general, right? Transformative could mean a lot of different things. This is really about utilizing technology to have better teaching and learning experiences. You could just stop there, but how do you do it? What's the point? Where does ecosystem come into that? Well, it's the ecosystem that allows you to achieve a responsive ecosystem in an institution. An institution can really chart a path with its faculty and learners and go in the direction they want to go. Agility, you could call it agility. We saw this in spades during the pandemic. During the pandemic, the K-12 institutions and our higher ed institutions who were members were saying the benefits that they reaped from being able to move quickly to different modes of learning was completely enabled by the work that they had been doing with us. Of course, you don't have to be a member to use our work. Many non-members use our work as well. But the thing is, the members tend to be the leaders in where it's going. There's also this idea of when you're responsive, you can be more innovative. but you also want to have a trusted ecosystem. You want trusted partners. The second area we like to say is about giving learners and faculty a foundation of choice and personalization, right? Or changing the world one learner at a time is what I like to say. This is a key trend over the next 10 to 20 years. It's already started, but it's really to make learning more personalized, to provide more flexibility in terms of how a student engages with learning materials, all the way through to what is their pathway through a learning program. And where does the ecosystem come into this one? Well, the ecosystem comes in because it is the foundation of choice. Without an ecosystem of products, hundreds and thousands of products that work together in a seamless manner, it's very, very difficult to provide a foundation of choice. And we've seen in the past where single vendors have tried to provide that foundation, and they all have failed, one after another, because there is no way a single vendor in education can provide everything that's needed and all the diversity that's needed for all different levels of education. It has to be an open ecosystem of partners working together. So that's what the second imperative is about. Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have pushed that button. Okay. The third one we like to call helping learners tell their story. So this is one I could talk about for a long time, but I don't know how in Japan people view their transcripts, their transcripts they get from whether it's primary school, secondary school, and so forth, college, university. But we've had a lot of interaction in the USA with registrars who are, generally speaking, the groups at universities who are responsible for transcripts. And it's very, very interesting because even they will say that a transcript has become primarily a celebratory document. A document that basically says, yay, I've achieved my diploma, and here's some courses and numbers that sort of back that up. But in terms of really being able to understand what that student can do, it doesn't really help very much. Now, obviously, for elite universities, just going through and getting through an elite university means a person has a certain capability that's very, very telling in terms of what they could do. But relatively few people in this world, including in the USA, are going to elite universities. Most are going to all different types of universities and different schools, and some aren't going to universities at all. And so our idea here is that we need to create an EdTech ecosystem that allows better capturing of achievements and better sharing of those achievements. And so that is a very, very critically important part of the EdTech ecosystem when we look at standards and the standards that are available. And we're very, very pleased to see the work that's going on in terms of enabling these types of recognition of achievements that go well beyond. Now, if you recognize achievements digitally, the other thing you can do is match them with opportunities. Digital matching of credentials to potential opportunities, whether they be employment opportunities or other types of opportunities, is much greater than with a paper transcript. So that's the third, helping learners tell their story. And the fourth is providing insights that foster student success. So in the USA, student success has been kind of a buzz phrase, a catchphrase for generally speaking, a change from universities trying to weed students out to trying to help students succeed. And particular, as the student body becomes more diverse and so forth, this has become very, very important. And the question is, how do you do it? There are some ways to do it that don't require really digging too much into the teaching and learning applications themselves. You can look at qualifications and pipelines and help with applications and things along those lines. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is having data built into the ecosystem, so into the products that are used in the ecosystem. So those will help either students directly, teachers, faculty, or even parents understand student progress in time, in real time, to make changes. So this is ensuring, our sense of this is from the ecosystem perspective, is ensuring that the ecosystem, every product, can provide usable insights and reliable data. So I haven't gone into any of the case studies. Those are all online. But I will say that we have many others that we're going to be adding, at least double this number. So how does this all fit together? Well, we have these 4 strategies, leadership imperatives, what we stand for as an organization going forward, and they all work together. One of the more interesting things from looking at our member stories is that most of them are doing more than one of these. Most of them are involved in at least 2, sometimes 3 or even 4. So it's really interesting because they actually do fit together. They actually do fit together. If you have a responsive ecosystem, you're also going to be creating the foundation for personalized learning, individualized learning. You're also probably going to be looking at how do you capture achievement in a better way. And you're also probably looking at, well, how do I make sure I have the data from those products and tools to understand, to give the student or parent information on the progress of the student. And I will say this to my friends in the IMS Japan Society, that we want your stories. The Uchida Yoko, the L-Gate, that is a great story. And we want your stories, and we will help you get your stories online and frame them within these categories. When we have a person on our staff that works with our members to do that. So we want to hear from you, and we want to hear from all of you about what you're doing. So these are the work streams, and really there's no change in these. Earlier in the last presentation, there were 5 columns of activities shown, initiative areas. We've only added 1. 5 are the same. The only one we've added is what we call data privacy and security, because we have found that that's a key foundational element, particularly in K-12. But also true in higher ed, we're finding that the management of the applications, which of course are growing, that are getting integrated in with the learning management system or learning environment, is not very good. It's not up to the level that it could be or should be. And so it's an area that our members are collaborating. But what I mainly wanted to point out with this chart is that these top 2, learning platforms, apps, and tools, data privacy and security, they align very closely with the first imperative, first leadership imperative. Curriculum innovation strategy aligns very closely to the second leadership imperative. The digital credentials work aligns very closely with the third leadership imperative. And then learning data and analytics and integrated assessment together align very, very closely with the fourth imperative. And as I mentioned earlier, it's from these work streams that the standards evolve. Okay, I have a couple more minutes, and I'm just going to close with just a reminder, if you didn't know already. We've already had the Learning Impact Conference this year, but we've had it since 2007. And we're continuing that because learning impact, the whole idea of learning impact or impact of our work, fits right into the new branding of 1EdTech. And this year in Nashville in June, we were essentially launching the 1EdTech brand, and it went very, very well. The key thing that was different at this year's conference is that some of the conversations were much more strategic. They were much more strategic. They've always been pretty strategic. If you've ever been to a Learning Impact Conference, you know that it's not just about talking about standards. It's about talking where is educational technology going. But this year we hit a new level of strategic discussion. We also, of course, have had the Learning Impact Awards since 2007, and those continue. And they were done virtually this year. Maybe next year we'll be back to live, but they've done virtually the last 3 years. We're very proud of everything we've learned from the Learning Impact Awards over the years, and we have a report online. But of course, as we already mentioned and did earlier, we were very, very proud of Uchida Yuichi Yoko's Bronze Award for the Learning ePortal or LGate. I expect many, many more. We also have 2 special summits in the US a year. One is now in November. Every November, it's now called, it's a new one called the Digital Curriculum and App Innovation Summit, which is all about curriculum innovation and learning content innovation. And we have a Digital Curriculum Summit, which we've been putting on for about 5 years now, which every year is for the end of February, early March. And next year, I don't have the exact dates with me right now, but it'll be in Dallas around a similar time. And of course, we're continuing to hold events around the globe, although most of them have been virtual. Our European Summit will be coming in a few weeks in 3rd, 4th of October. And lastly, we also have organized now a nonprofit foundation to go along with the 1EdTech Consortium. So the left here, 1EdTech Consortium, is really the transition of IMS Global. The 1EdTech Foundation is a philanthropic organization designed to attract philanthropic support from various foundations for our work specifically. But all the work is for the common good. And that's really going to wrap it up for me. This is the elevator speech. I went through it. Remember that our goal is to power learner potential together. Thank you very much.